Hey everybody, and welcome to The Breakthrough Effect. I'm your host, Jared Sebesta. I've had two successful careers. First, I was an award-winning TV meteorologist, and then a financial marketing strategist. I was living the dream, making good money, but inside I was craving for something more, something bigger. So I stopped deferring life and I started creating exactly the life I was searching for. I doubled down on unlearning old mindsets and creating big breakthroughs for me and my family. And now I'm bringing that same transformation to you. Let's understand the rules of this game. Let's get clarity. Let's stop chasing and start becoming. This is the Breakthrough Effect.
I remember one night, I was probably 23, 24 years old, still living at home because I wanted to take all my money and put it back into this club. I just had an emotional moment, a breakdown moment. It is literally like 1 a.m. and I went up into the kitchen. I lived in the lower level of my parents' house. I went up and I'm sitting at this table and I just broke down. My mom hears me and she comes out of the bedroom and she says, "What's wrong?" And I said, "I wrote payroll. I don't have enough money in the checking account to cover payroll." And I thought that this was going to be the end. All she said was, "You'll be okay."
All right, today on The Breakthrough Effect, I'm talking with Peter Taunton, a man who took an idea scribbled on a napkin and built it into one of the largest wellness empires on the planet. As the founder of Snap Fitness, which evolved now into Lift Brands, Peter grew a portfolio from 0 to over 4,000 franchises across 28 countries in just 16 years. Named Ernst Young Entrepreneur of the Year and recognized by Forbes, Entrepreneur 500, and Inc. 5000, Peter just didn't build businesses. He proved that impossible goals are simply goals nobody's figured out how to achieve yet. His Amazon #1 bestseller, Impossible Hill, chronicles 30 years of the mindset, grit, and strategic thinking behind building a global empire from scratch. Now, as a Forbes masterclass instructor and coach, Peter dedicates his life to igniting the same fire in others, helping them climb their own impossible hills. Get ready for a breakthrough conversation that will challenge everything you think you know about what's possible when vision meets execution. Please welcome Peter Taunton. Peter, thanks for joining me today, brother.
Hey, thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this. A couple of small town guys. You grew up in Montevideo, so look, I'm happy to be here and I'm all yours.
Dude, this is a really important conversation for me personally to have you on the line, so I'm going to come out hot. Are you ready?
Yeah, let's go. So
before we get into the business, what's your superpower? What can you do better than anybody else on this planet?
Wow, superpower. You know what? That's a lot to think about, and I think if I had to credit myself for anything, it was a no-quit attitude because, being successful, and success for me growing up poor, I measured success by how much money I was making. And as you know, trying to make money, it comes with challenges, and you have to be tenacious. You have to be committed with kind of a no-quit attitude. You have to persevere. So for me, my superpower, just no-quit attitude. Just when I hit adversity, plow through it and dust myself off and keep moving forward.
We have an interesting background. So where I'm sitting right now recording this is where you grew up. And so the fact that we, have that connection to me is beyond bizarre. We were chatting before we recorded. Back when I was in college, back in the 90s, that's how old I am. I was working out locally here at a gym, and it turns out that was your gym back in the day. That's crazy.
That is absolutely crazy, and that was in the 90s. That was America's Fitness Center, and that was literally my springboard. That was I had been in that space managing larger full-service clubs for 20 years. I did that for 20 years before I started Snap Fitness. So it was a great learning environment for me, and I'm blessed to have had the opportunity.
There's so many people that are listening right now. They want to start businesses. Perhaps they're early in business. I know it's been so long. I mean, we're pushing 30 years, and you've done so much since then. We'll get to, but go back there in your mind. If you can rewind the tape back to the 90s, you open up your first gym. Talk about some of those early struggles of fear and the anxiety that goes along with investing in yourself and starting a business. What was that like back then?
Well, I received the call at the time. Even though I grew up in Little Wilmer, Minnesota, there was a time that I played professional racquetball in my life, and I was living in Orlando, Florida. And I received a call from the owners of that club saying, "Hey, we would like you to come back and manage this club." They paid me $16,000 a year, which is not a lot of money. It wasn't not a lot of money then, and it's certainly not a lot of money today. But the opportunity they gave me was, hey, Peter, if you can turn this club around, we'll let you buy us out with the profits that it generates. So for me, it was, I looked at opportunity, and I always tell people, look, opportunity, it doesn't knock, it whispers. So sometimes you just need to pay attention to where opportunities might. And for me, I never saw failure. I looked at it as an opportunity and went in and looked at the club, assessed it, and then made some changes, and some immediate changes that were all customer facing. So that was really what I give myself the credit for, is going in, recognizing where the business was weak, and then making immediate changes with staffing, with the look and feel of the facility, just the culture. That was probably the biggest change that I made early on in that business.
I mean, I don't want to put an age on you, but like, you were young at the time, right? But like, how did you know how to do that? Like, where did you get that knowledge to know what you needed to do? Because I think a lot of people with business, they want to grow and build, but they don't know what to do. Where'd you get that know-how at that young age?
I think the first step in success, especially if you're dealing with something that's customer facing, if you're dealing with people, I think the first thing you need to do is put yourself into the customer's shoes and ask yourself, what can I do to make this a better customer experience? So that's where I started. Where did I learn it? I learned it through the lens of an 8-year-old, watching my dad at Tom and Bill's Red Owl, right there in Wilmer. So watching my dad put himself above nothing. And I credit my dad for that he literally, you'd see him bagging groceries, you'd see him shoveling the sidewalk, working the cash register, and doing the books. He put himself above nothing. And when you have that sense of commitment to your business and to your customers and to your employees, you get unbelievable loyalty, because they love seeing a guy that is not afraid to get in the trenches, roll his sleeves up, and pull deep on the oars for the vision of the business moving it forward. I applaud my dad in that, and that's where I learned it.
That's really interesting. And I know you recently lost your dad, so I'm really, really sorry to hear that. He sounds like a great man.
He was my mentor. You know, I can never repay him for all of the life lessons that he taught me. And I know that's true. I hope that's true for many of your listeners out there. You know, parents, they quietly mentor. And for all of us who are parents today, I urge you to really pay attention to what you're doing, because as your children are looking at you, they're quietly, like little sponges, looking at how you deal with adversity and success, both sides of it, right? Are you a humble winner and a gracious loser, right? Those are important qualities in business and in life.
I love that. And again, I connect with this and I resonate with this. And I'd like to hear your opinion on this. You know, again, I live and you are from rural Minnesota, mid-America. Like, we're in flyover territory, and we're in the flyover territory of the flyover territory. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I do.
You're raised with, you know, kind of in a scarcity, you know, poverty type of mindset, you know, not a ton of money growing up. Like, how did you break free from that mindset? Because I think you would agree, making money and building really comes down to a thought process. How did you shed that old skin? And maybe a more specific question is, when was the first time you realized that, like, I've got to get out of my own way up here if I really want to reach my destiny?
Well, watching my dad, when my dad had Tom and Bill's Red Owl, he had an opportunity from Red Owl Corporate out of Minneapolis to go out to Wilmer and turn around a failing grocery store. That was his opportunity. So he moved 7 kids, my mom and 7 kids. We moved out to little Wilmer, Minnesota. I went to school in a 2-room schoolhouse, and that's where my dad dug his heels in. The same mindset. He said, look, I'm going to make this. I'm going to turn this around. And how did he do it? He did it by entrenching himself in the community. And over the years, he became a pillar of the community. They named a baseball field after him. So look, the guy really committed himself to giving back within the community. So for me, early in my life, we didn't have family vacations. Our family vacation was loading 9 of us in a station wagon and driving to Findlay, North Dakota. That was our vacation. And from that, watching my dad eventually succeed and turn his grocery store around and make it successful, that was my mindset, saying, I saw how he did it, I can do it too. And that was just how I did it. When I had that opportunity to turn around that failing health club, that was fire in my belly. I said, I can do it. I think I can do it. and just applying the principles that I had learned from watching my dad over the years. Through that lens of an 8-year-old is where I taught a lot of how to deal with people, with customers, the full picture. Honestly, as trivial as that may sound, it's paying attention to everything that was going on around me and registering it and then applying it when I had my opportunity.
I bring up your name often. I'll bring up like Snap Fitness, and people they automatically know what that is. And I'm like, the guy who started that is from my hometown, and they always get a big kick out of that. And I'm always honored to say that about you. When you had America's Fitness, the gym I worked out in back in the 90s, did you envision Snap Fitness at the time? How did you jump from where you were there to where you eventually landed and beyond?
Well, you know what? I'm not afraid to say that I'm a Christian. And I think that God puts you in places to learn. And had I not, at 22 years old, had I not moved from Orlando back to Wilmer to take over that club, none of this comes into play. And then did that for 20 years. I ran that club and ended up expanding it for over a 20-year period. People think that I started Snap Fitness and that was my first experience. They don't realize the back chapters for 20 years. And that's why I talk to young entrepreneurs all the time. I would say, discipline, accountability, and perspective. A lot of people today, they lack perspective. They lack the idea of just how long that journey can be, okay? So for me, it took me 20 years, and then I sold those clubs. I had 7 of them that I had expanded to over that 20-year period. And I think I told you this earlier before we went live here. Look, I sold that. I had about $3 million in the bank, and I thought I was rich. I thought I could retire if I wanted to. And for another blessing in my life is one of the people who had worked with me, a guy from Hutchinson, Minnesota, had worked with me for about 10 years. I felt so committed to him. When I sold all my clubs, he was set up with a great employment package with the new owners, and he didn't like the environment. Okay, the culture changed within the business. And if it wasn't for him calling me, not once, but probably 10 times, asking me to build a club and he would run it, that got me in the mindset of, okay, I feel committed to this guy. I'm going to build a club and I'm going to have him run it. But I started taking things away. I didn't need swimming pools. I didn't need racquetball courts. I didn't need these big aerobic studios. So this 40,000 club eventually got condensed down to about 3,000 square feet. Now, keep in mind, when I did this, I didn't know at the time that I was going to go on to build one of the largest wellness brands in the world. I was just doing it to take care of this guy who I respected and appreciated all the years of commitment he had given to me. So that was kind of my springboard. I did one club. I say this all the time. I sold enough memberships in 90 days to cash flow that business for the year. I built another club in a different size market. It performed the exact same way. Now I was curious. I said, wow, I have one in an urban market. I have one in a mid-size market. I wonder how small can be. I put one in that guy's hometown, Cokato, Minnesota. I put it there and it thrived. That was my strike point. That's when I knew I had a tiger by the tail. I had something that was very scalable, and more importantly, I had vetted the process out, and I knew that, I always say this, the dogs were eating the dog food, meaning the customer appreciated the value that I was delivering. So that it was from there I converted it to a franchise, and the rest is history.
Is that the key where you saw, and again, as I'm listening to your story, you're talking about less is more. Essentially, is that what you're saying, where it was like we scaled it back and we made it very scalable and palatable for clients? Is that like the key? Is that whatever industry people are in, is it where they have to look at it through a different lens and see kind of where the opportunity is? How would you articulate that?
I love the question. And look, taking a step back, you've got to look at delivering value to the customer. And I knew that my product was not for everyone. Keep in mind, for the previous 20 years, I was delivering a product with swimming pools and group fitness aerobic classes and racquetball courts. But here's the reality. Those were all very expensive propositions to incorporate into a business. And that swimming pool, it sat idle, empty most of the day. So I looked at those things and then said, look, I'm going to build a smaller club. And I know it's not going to appeal to everyone. I knew that going into it. If you needed childcare and swimming pools and racquetball, I was not your answer. But here's what I bet my life on. I bet the fact that I'm going to appeal to enough people where this business can thrive. And my hunch was right. I experimented with it in 3 different markets. I really learned every club that I built. I learned a little bit more in this process before I launched my franchise. And I incorporated those components into the success of Snap Fitness.
Beautifully said. Anytime you're building something, and I'm finding this out with myself and other people who have built really, really cool businesses and gotten to that level of success, so to speak. But
for some reason, I had a little bit of you cut out a little bit.
There we go. Are we back? You good?
Yep.
Okay.
Now I hear you just fine.
I'll reframe that question. I'm finding this out in my own business that I'm building right now as we speak, and other people who have built businesses already. Those first 3 to 5 years are scary. I find myself still having like freak out moments where I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I hyperventilate. Like, can you take me back to like when you were doing those? Maybe maybe you still have those, but like take me back to some of those freak out moments. What did they feel like? And how did you get through those to just keep pressing ahead, even though the future was uncertain?
You know what? Once I started Snap Fitness, I really didn't have any freak out moments. Most of my freak out moments came the previous 20 years, literally trying to turn a failing business around, and I had to do it. I had to turn around the failing business in order to generate a profit, in order to buy everyone out. So I had a business that was mine, and from the profits of that business is how I started Snap Fitness. So I learned there. I've been in situations where I've wrote payroll checks with not enough money in the checkbook. But if you remember, you talk about dating ourselves. I'm 63, and I can tell you back then, you wrote payroll checks and you gave it to the employees. You had about 3 days of float, because by the time they took those checks and went to the bank and cashed it, and I had many moments like that, and that was scary. That was very scary. And I remember one night that and I was living at home. I was probably 23, 24 years old, still living at home, because I wanted to take all my money and put it back into this club, right? And I just had an emotional moment, a breakdown moment. It is literally like 1 a.m, and I went up into the kitchen. I lived in the lower level of my parents' house. I went up and I'm sitting at this table, the coffee table, and I just broke down. I was literally crying, tears coming down my face at a 24-year-old man. And once again, divine intervention. My mom hears me and she comes out of the bedroom. She must have sensed it, because I wasn't loud and blubbering, right? She came out and I felt her hand go on my shoulder, and she says, "What's wrong?" And I said, "I wrote payroll. I don't have enough money in the checking account to cover payroll." And I thought that this was going to be the end. I really thought this could be the end. And all she said was, you'll be okay, right? I don't know how she knew. Literally, I took that for its word, went back to bed, and it ended up being okay. The next day, I had about 3 or 4 people come in and pay in full their membership. And I took those payments and I literally ran to the bank with them, and I covered it. The rest is history, but those are the character building moments of owning a business. And you just have to understand, in business, there's no sure thing. It takes hard work. You're going to have scary moments like that, but you've just got to believe in yourself and find a way to get through it and have commitment and confidence in yourself.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, because that's kind of where I'm at right now, just building, and it's working. But I got to tell you, man, there's still those times where it catches you off guard, and you feel that fear and anxiety. And again, it's soothing. We don't like hearing that you've had those moments and the tears and whatnot, but it is soothing to know that is kind of part of the process. You know what I'm saying? How do you, what's the pattern that you see people, yourself included, that make it versus the ones that don't? You mentioned the grit, just the keeping on. But when you see somebody, what is it about them where you're like, that guy is going to make it, that girl is going to make it? What do you see in them?
As you know, I do a lot of consulting today, and I can tell people that are going to win by the discipline that they have. there's three words, and I mentioned it earlier: discipline, accountability, and perspective. If you don't have discipline, you're not going to hold yourself accountable, which means you're not going to hold yourself to any high standard. And then perspective, you have to have the patience to understand that some of these things are going to take time. Now, with that said, in our lives, we meet people, and they just got it. They have good communication skills. They connect with people easily. And it has nothing to do with how book smart they are. Okay? I get a kick out of people when they say, well, I never graduated from college. I listen to them, I let them get it off their chest, and I say, so what? I didn't either. That has nothing to do with it. Unless you're going to be a doctor, an accountant, a lawyer, something where it's a trained profession. But if you're going to be an entrepreneur, look, college degree, especially today's day and age, it means diddly squat, honestly. So I look for those things. I look for those quality in people where they've got that fire in the belly, and it's kind of unchanneled energy, and they just don't know where to focus that energy, number one. Here's the other side of that. When I say no quit attitude, you wouldn't believe the amount of people that I talk to that are neck deep in a business. They've been running this business for 5 years. It's not working out. The business is still not cash flowing, or if it is, it's barely cash flowing. And I have to tell them, look, I don't think this business is going to work. And I'll tell you why. It's not relevant anymore. The product that you're delivering, it's not relevant in the eyes of the consumer. They want to talk about, I'm not spending enough in advertising. No, this is not an advertising issue. This is a relevance issue. And there's not, I think people out there, they hate to hear the sobering news. Look, this is something you need to change or pivot this model. And then you have to go down a whole other path on what is the cost of pivoting your business model. Because there's road rash associated with that, because you've been trying to educate your customer on who you are for the last 5 years, and now you're trying to say, wait a minute, stop the presses, I'm not that guy, I'm this guy now. So sometimes I tell them, look, you're almost better off shutting down that entity and starting new with a fresh new logo, name, and model. Honestly, those are tough discussions to have with people, but that's my job, to help them pivot and fight their way out of sometimes a very tough situation.
I'm going to put myself in the shoes of somebody listening to you right now, and they're struggling to kind of get the wheels going, the momentum building in their business, their platform, their message, or whatever it is that they're building. How does that person know if it's time to trudge on, or it's time to pivot and try something different, or worst case scenario, maybe not worst case scenario, but actually shut it down? What is like that key thing that they need to understand that maybe will give them that clarity to say, no, this is actually what I need to double down on and not move away? Can you pinpoint it to one or two things?
Easily. It's hubris, okay? It's people that they put themselves in this position where they say, look, I know that I'm right on this, and they refuse to look at it. So there's many times, especially with founders that I talk to, they're guilty of smoking their own exhaust. Okay, this is their baby, and they don't want to hear anything converse about it, all right? So I would say nobody wants to hear their baby's ugly, okay? But when I'm talking to people, I tell them, look, the product isn't relevant, and I think you need to go outside your little bubble and get a feel. If you want to do a quick, easy, assessment survey of of not your customer base, but outside, really get to the root cause of why this business isn't succeeding. A lot of times people want to pin it on marketing because that's so tangible, and we hear about it everywhere we turn today. But the deep-rooted problem might be the fact that it's not relevant anymore. Okay, you didn't evolve your business as you should have, because I don't care what industry you're in, it's constantly evolving. I mean, look around us today. AI as an example. My gosh, we're probably, I've just heard this the other night, listening to your podcast, from an AI expert saying, look, we are probably 15% of the way into what AI is going to do as it changes the world that we live in today. 15%. So think about that. Where we are today, it is going to jump 6x. You're going to see it automate many things. There's going to be many jobs that are going to become obsolete because of the AI is going to do it, and it's going to do it better. That's a scary premise for a lot of people, but it's coming. That light at the end of the tunnel, if you think if you think that's a break, it's a train coming if you're in the wrong field, in my opinion.
I love this. And again, you've been in business for so long, done so many things well, and been a global entrepreneur. What do you see ahead? Like for people that are, I don't want to say just getting started, but now stepping into this entrepreneurial, growth-minded type of game or world, where do you see the opportunities?
If somebody wants to get into the programming side of it, look, AI, it's white hot right now, okay? And it's not going away. I mean, it's going to be as revolutionary to society as the internet was, okay? It's going to have as much impact as Google has, Apple has, Microsoft. We're talking big changes. Amazon, look, and if you look at every one of those companies, what are they doubling and tripling down on? AI, okay? So I tell people, look, if you want to be into AI, understanding AI, becoming an expert will serve you well in the future. Number one. Number two, if you're more of a laborer, if you don't like that programmer, if you're an electrician, a plumber, a carpenter, hey, look, your job's solid, okay? High demand, because you can't AI your way out of that. Now, if you're a technical writer, if you're an interior designer, look, I could go on and on. Even accounting is going to change dramatically, because as AI experiments with accounting, it self-educates, and it's just a matter of time before you can just plug in numbers, feed it numbers, and it's going to give you a very, very comprehensive report, and will do your tax return for you. It's coming, okay? So that's the world that's coming, and you can't put the blinders on. You better embrace it, because it's only going to become more and more prevalent in the world that we live in.
I love that answer. I got to start landing this plane. We're getting close out of time, but I got a couple more questions for you.
Yeah.
What are you most excited about? Like, where do you see yourself going in the next 5 to 10 years plus? Like, where do you go from here?
Well, I love the things that I'm doing today. I love consulting for companies and for people, for entrepreneurs, CEO founders who are looking to exit their business. And how do you exit gracefully? I mean, as silly as this sounds, let's say you have a founder and he's the CEO of the company and he's been doing it for the last 20 years, okay? His whole identity centers around that business, okay? He's been the face of the company and he wants to sell the business. I applaud him. He's going to sell it. He's going to have a nice exit. But I help them walk through, what does the next chapter of your life look like? Because I tell you, is when you sell the company, yes, your bank account is going to be fat, but the piece of it that's not going to be fulfilling anymore is the demand for you goes away. I mean, when I was running Snap Fitness, somebody's always bringing me coffee, somebody's opening doors for me. You get this level of treatment. Anywhere I went, 25, 26 countries, I was always getting special treatment. When you sell the company, it doesn't take long. Pretty soon, you're not as necessary for the big picture of things. For some people, it's hard to get their head around that. That's a tough adjustment to make. So I help them find something else that's going to give them the purpose that they're looking for, that's still going to light their fire. In my case, I love helping young aspiring entrepreneurs. I also love the mid-range entrepreneur who's got a business that might have become a little complacent. So I want to help them pivot their business. And then I love the company that says, look, you know what? We need help, and they're willing to listen. That's a big point, that listening. They're willing to listen to the tough suggestions of how do we wind this down and then ramp it back up.
I love that, because I hear alignment, right? You're utilizing all your skills, your experiences, your knowledge, your grit, and then applying that. And again, that's kind of where I love where I am, because even though as scary as it is, this is the most impactful, aligned thing I can be doing with my life. And that brings me a lot of peace, knowing like if my life came to an end, sooner than later, I feel pretty good about what I did. I think that's kind of what we're all talking about here. It's not necessarily the success of business, it's the impact on other people. And I hear you saying that. It's fantastic.
No, and I love it. You're very, very good at what you do. You've got your questions are on point. But I tell people all the time, look, you've got to monetize it. You got to be able to monetize what you're doing. There's a lot of kids. I just had a conversation the other day with a young man who's doing social media. And look, he's got a lot of followers, and I don't know how much of them are bots or whatnot. I don't care about any of that drama, right? But at the end of the day, I say, look, are you making money? Okay, because you've got to monetize it. You're in the earning years of your life. I don't want you to wake up one day, 6 years later, you're 30 years old now, and you've just spent the last 6 years trying to make yourself feel good because you've got some followers on Facebook, but you have not been able to monetize it. At the end of the day, you got to, if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense. I'm not saying you can't do it as a side hustle, go for it. But at the end of the day, if you're a traditional person like I am, when I say traditional, what's my job? My job is to provide and protect for my family, right? I saw my dad do it, and I own that. So, as a young married person, man, being the man of the house, I'm, once again, call it old school, apple pie, but I'm that traditional guy. I'm going to provide, protect for my family, and there's nothing more rewarding when you can do that for your family.
I love it. I love it. One last question, and this is a question I give all of my guests right at the end. If you could go into the minds of the people listening right now and install one program that would create the biggest breakthrough for their life, their business, and their money, what would you install in their minds?
I would encourage them to do a self-audit, okay? A self-audit of their time, because the time is the one thing. It doesn't matter how much money you have. You can't buy more, you don't get less, all right? So I would tell them do a personal audit on how they're spending their time. And if their goal to find purpose in life is to have money, I want to assess how much of their time are they spending on things that are actually moving the ball down the field and not just making themselves feel good, but literally moving the ball down the field. And that is a very sobering exercise for a lot of people, because you're going to take away some things. You're saying, look, you know what? You're spending 40% of your time on something that brings zero purpose to what you're doing. It's fluff. It's waste. So that's the one thing I would tell them. Do a personal audit of your time and be truthful with yourself. And then keep in mind, what does that North Star look like for you? That goal that you've set for yourself, that personal goal that we all do. And then make sure that you put breadcrumbs along the way, that you have little milestones. Because as I said before, the journey, it's a long one. It's a long journey. Give yourself milestones, because if you don't, you're going to sit there and think that you're spinning your wheels. But if you hit these milestones, many times I'm talking to people, I say, look, you feel like you've done nothing, but let's assess it. You were here, here's where you are today, and here's where you're going. You've got clear vision. You're concise on the direction where you want to go. Where you want to go, it's still relevant in what society is looking for today. Just keep plowing forward and keep auditing yourself and make sure you're spending your time wisely.
Fantastic advice, my friend. Just a masterclass here in business and growth and really becoming something bigger than yourself, and you're an epitome of that. So I appreciate your time here today, man. Before I let you go, where can people find you? You're a great follow on Instagram, LinkedIn. Where else can people find out what you're doing?
I think that's it. I think, for me, follow me on Instagram. It's Peter _ my last name, Taunton, which is TAUNTON. Find me on Instagram, and every day I post something that's kind of business related or life related. My stories are just my real life situations of what I'm going through. Look, I've just had an exceptional life, and I try to share that with people. Those that find interest in it. I'm not better than anyone else. We all get up every day and we put in an honest day's work. My work today is just a little bit different than what it used to be, 7-8 years ago. But it's all good.
If this conversation sparked something in you, don't let it fade. Please rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform. Don't forget to connect with me online as well. Follow me at Jared Sebesta on Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube, or dive deeper at my website, jaredsebesta.com, where all my free trainings and resources are waiting for you. And remember, stop chasing the life you want and start becoming. This is the Breakthrough Effect. We'll see you next time.